Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Police in Illinois now have a suspect in custody following a mass shooting at an Independence Day parade, which left 6 people dead and around 30 people injured. The Alberta NDP responds to a Conference Board of Canada report, which says consumer confidence in our province is quite low. And 12 first responders have graduated in Lethbridge. BCN's Micah Quinn chats with some of our city's newest firefighters.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A person of interest was taken into custody following the Monday shooting at an Independence Day parade in Illinois, which left 6 people dead and at least 30 people injured. Officials say 21-year-old Robert E. Cremo III was arrested.
Ultimately, they were able to get the subject stopped at Wesley and 41 in Lake Forest. The subject was taken into custody without incident. The person of interest is now being taken to the Highland Park Police Department, where we're going to begin the next phase of the investigation and speak with this person.
The person of interest that we're talking about here is
Robert Cremo III. That is correct. The person we came out initially and gave you the information on.
All this law enforcement just surrounded this car that was turning. And they had the dogs out. They had, their guns drawn.
Everyone's pretty shaken. I think, you're used to hearing about this stuff elsewhere, but it definitely hits a lot harder when, it's not only your hometown, but it's also right in front of you.
The Highland Park Parade was not the only U.S. holiday celebration that ended in gun violence. Police in Gary, Indiana, say a shooting during an Independence Day block party left 3 people dead and 7 wounded. Since the start of 2022, there have been 15 mass shootings in the United States where 4 more people were killed. A black man was unarmed when police in Akron, Ohio chased him on foot and killed him in a hail of gunfire on June the 27th. Officers say they believe Jalen Walker had shot at them earlier from a vehicle and feared he was preparing to fire again.
There is a photograph that appears Mr. Walker was turning towards the officer, and there is a picture that captures a forward motion of his arm. At the crime scene, after the officers were involved in the shooting, they immediately get sequestered from one another, and they are monitored. When the investigative team arrives, they do an individual walkthrough of the crime scene. Each officer, independent of each other, related that they felt that Mr. Walker had turned and was motioning and moving into a firing position. While BCI needs to confirm the number of times Mr. Walker was shot, the ME's report indicates over 60 wounds to Mr. Walker's body. There was a gun recovered from Mr. Walker's vehicle. At the time of the shooting, he was unarmed.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau participated in a roundtable discussion about gun violence here in our country. There's been an increase in shootings in Canada's largest city, Toronto. Trudeau heard about how community members have been impacted by gun violence and talked about potential next steps.
We've had far, far too many conversations about heartbreak in your riding, in Toronto, from gun violence impacting communities, impacting families, turning everything upside down in so many ways anytime a parent needs to show up at a child's funeral. There's always more to do to fight gun violence, to reduce its impact, but we've done a lot of big things as a government, a lot of it inspired by conversations with you and folks like you right across the country. Yes, we see a debate around gun control, but there's not a debate around whether our communities need to be safer, whether we need to keep kids safe from violence.
One of the organizers of the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, Tamara Leach, will be staying behind bars until at least Friday. Judge Paul Harris says he will be able to give his decision on her bail hearing then. Leach appeared alongside a fellow organizer in an alleged breach of her conditions. She was seen in a social media post standing beside Tom Marazzo when she accepted the George Jonas Freedom Award in Toronto last month. Part of her bail condition was that she could not have any contact with Marazzo nor be on social media except through counsel or in the presence of counsel. Leach was a key figurehead of the massive protest that took over the streets of downtown Ottawa for close to a month back in February. She and fellow protest organizer Chris Barber are both accused of mischief, obstructing police, counseling others to commit mischief, and intimidation. A number of Canadians are quite concerned that the Trudeau Liberals may bring back COVID-19 restrictions this fall, considering they were only suspended. Political reporter Brian Lilly says for the Liberals, it's all about not giving up that power.
This government seems to hold on to COVID protocols harder and tighter than anywhere else in the world, even Australia, and they were one of the hardest when it came to restrictions, starting to drop them. But not the Trudeau government, who were able to use this for political gain back in September and narrowly, very narrowly, win the election. Now they don't want to give it up because they know it can be a powerful political tool with the fear that they're able to sow.
Mr. Lilly will also offer up his thoughts on if CPC leadership candidate Pierre Poilievre can not only win the leadership, but also defeat Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in a federal election. You'll have details coming up in the second half of our program. Now here's a follow-up to a story we first brought you last week. A teenage girl from Edmonton who was first reported missing about a week ago was found in Oregon. Police say a 41-year-old man from Oregon has been arrested. Edmonton police say they are charging him with child luring. Other charges may also be pending. The 13-year-old girl who rode the bus to school on June 24th but was reported missing by her family after it was learned she did not attend class or came home later that afternoon. A 27-year-old man has been charged with first-degree murder after a man was found dead at a McDonald's in central Alberta on Monday. RCMP say 19-year-old Josh Burns was found shortly after midnight when police responded to reports of a homicide at the restaurant in Sundre. Solomane Albetta has been charged with first-degree murder. Both men are residents of Sundre, which is located about 100 kilometers north of Calgary. Police in Lethbridge have charged a local business owner with fraud. 40-year-old Grant Ryan Stevenson of Sterling faces numerous charges, including theft over $5,000, fraud, and mischief over $5,000. Police say the incidents occurred between 2018 and 2021 when Stevenson allegedly would charge advanced fees through a mechanic shop with no work being done. Victims were allegedly defrauded around $500,000. The investigation is ongoing, and police are asking any victims of the scheme to come forward and call the Lethbridge Police Economics Crimes Unit at 403-327-2210. Alberta Wildfire says the danger in the Fort McMurray Forest area is quite high. It says there have been 36 wildfires in the region so far this year, burning more than 26,000 hectares. The agency says there are 3 wildfires in remote areas that pose no threat to communities, but firefighters are watching them very closely. A 4th fire is being classified as held and is located around 20 kilometers north of Fort Chipewyan. Firefighters say they're ready to act if the fire approaches the community. Fortunately, no wildfires here in our region. We've had lots of rain over the past week or so, very wet outside. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, those rain clouds may be returning here to southwestern Alberta again fairly soon?
You know, just when we thought we got away from it, we could see more rain in the forecast on Wednesday. Wednesday starting out pretty nice, though. Mix of sun and cloud in the morning. UV index of 9, which is very high. High of 23. But then by the afternoon, we're looking at a 60% chance of showers and a risk of thunderstorms. Those showers remaining through Wednesday evening and even seeing some showers on Thursday. After that, it should be a pretty sunny week. I will get into all those details coming up later on in the newscast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Streets Alive mission is in dire need of donations, especially with the warmer weather just around the corner. The mission says there are around 200 people currently living on the street here in the city who need basic items like shoes and clothing. Ken Kissick with the mission says donations are so desperately needed right now.
Our needs change in terms of seasonal wear, but they don't change in terms of basic things like pants. We need water. Bottled water with the heat coming and everything else, but we're out, our outreach team is out. We're making sure they're hydrated and those kinds of things. We have shirts and jackets and those kinds of things we're good in, but that area of min pant or sweat pants, those kinds of things we can use. Sunscreen, we're going to need that for sure. We're going to, like I said, the water, we're going to need those other things that you would normally require people to have in terms of hygiene, wipes, and those kinds of things.
By the way, any donations can be made directly to the Streets Alive mission. A total of 12 new graduates from the Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services are set to begin their careers. The group took part in a ceremony on Tuesday morning as friends and family looked on, along with local politicians. BCN's Micah Quinn was there and has more on this exciting day.
The sound of bagpipes welcomed 12 recruits of the Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services into their newest gigs as firefighters and advanced care paramedics. Local dignitaries like Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas, Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf, and Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgin were on hand to welcome the graduates. Bronson Bush was chosen by his peers as the winner of the Kilkenny Award, which means Bush was the best among his peers and showed exemplary leadership within his class. Besides the accolade, Bush says it was amazing to finally graduate.
While I was writing my speech, I kept remarking that it sounded kind of ridiculous that in 2 months' time, these guys were as close with me as my own family. I think that's just kind of a testament to the work that we put in and the success of the training program here.
Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services is an integrated department where both firefighters and EMS workers are trained and work together. There are 178 members within the department. The Deputy Chief, Garrett Sinke, mentioned how long of a journey it was for the graduates to be able to get to this point, and that these 12 were handpicked from over 100 applicants.
During our training program, we've worked really hard to prepare them for what they're about to face. And what they're about to face is many medical scenarios. We have some issues with drug problems in the city as well, and they are equipped to deal with those and to save lives wherever they can.
There won't be much downtime for a few of the graduates, as they'll be starting their first shifts with Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services on Wednesday. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
There appears to have been an increased number of house fires in Lethbridge over the past year. Troy Hicks, fire prevention officer with the Lethbridge Fire Department, says a number of those fires are attributed to people not properly disposing of their cigarettes. He says some fires have been caused from people butting out in planters.
We have everything from planters, or we've had issues with plastic buckets that the person thought there was water in. We've even had issues with people using a proper ashtray. But it's an ashtray that's meant for indoors, not outdoors, and they'll have it on their back patio. We all know the winds here in southern Alberta, and they go outside, they have their cigarette, they put it out, but it's not really out. And once they go back inside, the wind picks up, blows those embers around, and whether it's a lawn chair or anything like that, it catches it on fire.
Fire Prevention Officer Troy Hicks will have more safety tips for us coming up in the second half of our program. New information from the Lethbridge Housing Report says housing starts were down here in the Windy City. New data says there were a total of 44 new builds in our city, which is down 14 from the previous month. Of the new homes being constructed, 24 were single detached, while 18 were row or semi-detached units. The overall total is down 5 from the 10-year average. Meanwhile, in Medicine Hat, construction began on 46 units in May. Most, or around 30, were row or semi-detached homes. Provincially, there were just under 3,864 housing starts in May. That is up 11.3% from the previous month and up 35.2% from last year. A new art installation is hoping to spark some conversations about decolonization. The Hope and Healing Canada project has woven intricate pieces of red yarn using crochet and placed them on the front of the Fort Whoop-Up building in Lethbridge. Organizers for the project say it's meant to really illustrate the connection between our Métis, Indigenous, and non-Indigenous peoples.
As far as I'm concerned, the strings in particular are the best way to represent this, because one string is strong, 2 strings is stronger, 3 strings is stronger still. But if you cross-thatch those strings, they're almost unbreakable, right? Even though it's still string, it's still almost unbreakable. And that's what a community needs to do.
And that's something we are intending to focus on with our interpretive staff here this summer, is to think about the fort from multiple lenses, like different perspectives on this fort, rather than just the predominantly settler colonial one that this place has focused on, that kind of narrative over the years. And so we want to bring in different narratives to think in more complex ways about what this site means both today and throughout history.
That is one talented individual. By the way, the art pieces will remain at Fort Whoop-Up until October. The Alberta government announced that it is increasing funding for the Film and Television Tax Credit Program to $70 million. Officials say the extra funding will help meet the demand in production volume for TV series and movies being shot here. The UCP says it's part of Alberta's commitment to be competitive with other provinces, which is why it is investing around $1.5 billion over the next decade. Now, others argue that the province has actually cut 70% in government funding to support Alberta-made productions with budgets under $500,000. The Alberta NDP says consumer confidence is slipping here in our province. The official opposition critic for economic development, Darren Billis, says the Conference Board of Canada's recent numbers released should be a serious warning sign for Alberta.
While consumer confidence has dropped 8.8 points across Canada, in Alberta it's plunged by more than 20 points, the biggest drop of any province or region by far. Consumer confidence is now at levels we haven't seen since early in the pandemic. Almost 40% of Albertans surveyed expect their finances to get worse in the next 6 months, and more than 40% say they're worse off than they were 6 months ago. Nearly 60% say it's a bad time to make a major purchase, numbers we haven't seen since 2020. These are extremely concerning signals, especially given that they're coming while oil prices have remained above $100 per barrel for several months.
Thunderstorms and hot weather hampered the search for more than a dozen hikers who remained unaccounted for a day after a huge chunk of an alpine glacier in Italy broke off over the weekend.
Adesso che è l'1:15, 1:30, ci hanno chiamati e che è caduta giù la marmolada, in pratica è caduta giù la cima, insomma, ecco. E la cima non è altro che un grande pezzo di ghiaccio che si è staccato e ha investito tutti quelli che erano sul ghiacciaio, i vari alpinisti che stavano o scendendo o salendo. E noi quando siamo arrivati lì ci siamo trovati veramente davanti a un scenario pazzesco, perché c'erano blocchi di ghiaccio e sassi enormi dappertutto. E abbiamo cominciato a cercare, poi sono arrivati altri soccorritori chiaramente, e comunque le prime vittime sono state tirate fuori e adesso vediamo, insomma. Per oggi abbiamo sospeso tutto perché la temperatura è calda, insomma non è il caso di andare a rischiare, e niente, vedremo più avanti quello che c'è da fare, insomma.
As the war in Ukraine continues, it is causing disruption in global food supplies. Food that would go to feed a number of families in different African nations. Families in Somalia have been struggling to feed themselves while a drought continues to ravage a large part of their country.
waxaana soo barakicisi awaar oon iyo biyo yaa xoolihii waa naga dhammaaday waxaan cunno ma haysan sidii anagoo dad badan aan nahay 20 qof ama 30 qof camal imaanay xamar aan soo galnay.
Hundreds of homes are underwater in and around Australia's largest city as the flood has now impacted more than 500,000 people. Days of torrential downpour have caused dams to overflow and waterways to break their banks, bringing a fourth flood emergency in 16 months to parts of the city of 5 million people.
It's more than just rain, because we had the rain and within not even 24 hours, it started on Friday morning, was it? By Friday night we were under, and it usually takes a week of constant rain, and we still don't flood. So this was unbelievable.
Well, we had kind of a soggy start to our workday, and more of the moisture will be returning. Full weather details are on deck. You know, with all of the moisture we've been receiving lately in Lethbridge, it seems like the mosquitoes have been out in full force with a vengeance. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, so far I've counted about 10 bites on my legs. How about you?
Wow, that's a lot, Hal. You know, I managed to escape to a much drier climate over the long weekend, so I think I may have evaded those mosquito bites, at least for now, though, because there is more rain in the forecast. Beginning with Wednesday, we're looking at a 60% chance of showers in the afternoon. Afternoon also risk of some thunderstorms there. 23 degrees is the high, up to 28 on Thursday. Also seeing a 30% chance of showers on Thursday. After that, we're looking at dry and sunny forecast there. So sunshine Friday, 28 the high, 27 the high for Saturday, Sunday high of 26. Should be a lovely weekend coming up, and then high of 27 on a Monday with lots of sunshine. So we're getting back into that what's supposed to be summer weather. So average high for this time of year, 25 degrees, average low 10. 36 was our high temperature on this day back in 2007, and in 2003 we were sitting at only 4 degrees. That is very cold for July. 5:31 is when the sun rose this morning. Our sun set this evening at 9:41, giving us 16 hours and 10 minutes of daylight. So we're definitely seeing the days getting a little bit shorter. On the west coast, looking at 18 degrees the high in Victoria with showers, expecting some fog patches and wind in the Juan de Fuca Strait. Vancouver also seeing a 30% chance of showers, high of 20 degrees. 21 in Edmonton with rainy conditions and risk of a thunderstorm. 22 the high in Calgary. Calgary, much the same as Lethbridge tomorrow. Going to see the sunshine in the morning. Then those clouds are going to roll in and risk of thunderstorms. 26 the high in Regina. Sunshine. 24 the high in Saskatoon and 25 in Winnipeg. Winnipeg also seeing rain and a risk of thunderstorm. Humid conditions also. Extreme humidity in the central part of the country. All of these cities sitting at high humidity. Toronto 25 the high. Rain. 24 the high in Ottawa with clearing skies, and Montreal sitting also at 23 with partly cloudy skies. In the west coast, Fredericton, we're looking at 15 to 25 millimeters of rain there. Halifax seeing some showers as well. 19 the high in Fredericton, 18 the high in Halifax. Same thing for Charlottetown. Charlottetown looking at 10 to 20 millimeters of rain. 21 degrees the high tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland with partly cloudy skies and 20 to 40 kilometer per hour winds there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
A new study says the Bank of Canada needs a new approach to fight inflation. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives says the central bank's strategy of rapidly increasing interest rates is likely to trigger a recession. The Institute says the policy could cause significant collateral damage, including 850,000 job losses. It says the bank might reduce the risk of causing a recession if it raises its target inflation rate from 2 to 4%. The International Energy Agency says high prices and supply fears due to the war in Ukraine will slow the growth in demand for natural gas in the coming years. In a report, the agency forecasts the global demand for natural gas will rise by 140 billion cubic meters between now and the year 2025. That is less than half the increase seen in the previous years. The revised forecast is mostly due to expectations of slower economic growth rather than buyers switching from gas to other fossil fuels such as oil or coal. The agency says the switch to renewable energy sources also had a major impact. A new business in Winnipeg is billing itself as Canada's largest inflatable theme park. The Big Bounce Park is slated to open next week and offers 1,200 square meters of bouncy castles and other inflated structures. Looks like a lot of fun. The owner, Nicole Dutt, says it was his dream as a child to one day open a big bouncy park, and now so many others can share in that dream. That does look like a great time. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 194 points on the day to finish at 18,834. The Dow was down 129 points to 30,967. The S&P 500 was up 6 points on the day to 3831, and the Nasdaq was also up 194 points to 11,322. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $8.77 to $99.66 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 24 cents to $5.49 US. Gold was down $5.11 to $18.1654 US an ounce, and silver was down 75 cents to $19.23 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.97 per bushel, barley's at $8.82, canola's at $18.43, and corn is at $10.66 per bushel. Live cattle August contract was down $1.68 to $132.93. Feeder cattle August contract was down $1.80 to $172.70, and lean hogs July contract was up $2.55 to $112.15. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 76.75 US. Recapping one of our top stories, a person of interest has been taken into custody after a gunman opened fire at a 4th of July event near Chicago. He's identified as 21-year-old Robert E. Cremo III. The Highland Park Parade was not the only U.S. holiday celebration that ended in gun violence. Police in Gary, Indiana say a shooting during an Independence Day block party left 3 people dead and 7 others wounded. Since the start of 2022, there have been 15 mass shootings in the United States where 4 more people were killed. CPC leadership hopeful Pierre Poilievre may have sold the most party memberships, but is he a lock to win the leadership for the federal Conservatives? Political reporter Brian Lilly is not so sure, and he'll give us his thoughts next.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to a lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers will drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, call 403-332-4320 or email volunteer@volunteerlethbridge.com. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a nonprofit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. It holds clinics on Tuesdays from 4 to 6 p.m. by appointment only. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. For more information, call 403-380-6338 or visit their website, lethbridgelegalguidance.ca.
It appears as though more and more Canadians are signing up to become card-carrying members of the Federal Conservative Party. Even though Pierre Poilievre's camp say they've sold the most memberships, he still may not win the CPC leadership. To discuss this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, how can this leadership race not be a lock for Mr. Poilievre? What's going on?
It comes down to math. It's not a matter of opinion, despite what some in the Poilievre camp, including some in his leadership, would say. They're not happy with one of my latest columns where I looked at the numbers and I said, okay, these are really good. And let me be clear off the start. Pierre Poilievre has sold an impressive amount of memberships, but the actual number of memberships in the Conservative Party is higher than we even thought. A little while ago, we were told, oh, party's going to break 400,000 members. Then it became 500. Then it became 600. Well, late last week, they announced 675,000 members. That means 675,000 people who can have a say, if they choose to vote, in the next leadership. Now, the Poilievre camp has put out a very specific number. While Patrick Brown has said we've sold more than 150,000, there were 123,000 existing members by the June 3rd cutoff date, and Charest says we sold tens of thousands. Poilievre's camp was very specific. 311,958 memberships. Okay, that works out to 46% of the total membership. And you would think, well, that's an automatic lock to win. Except, speaking to people who have both won and lost under the current complex system, remember, it's each riding's worth 100 points. You get the points based on your percentage of the vote, and a riding with 5,000 members is worth the same as a riding with 500 members when it comes to points. So he may have the most membership sold, but may not win. The people that I've been speaking to say he's either got to win outright on the first ballot or be at about 45% and up in order to win, because in each successive round, it becomes more difficult for him to inch up. So if he comes in at 42% of the vote, it's going to be hard, not impossible, but hard for him to move up to get over 50% as the other people drop off. So this is why I'm saying that there is a path to victory for both Jean Charest and Patrick Brown. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not cheering for either side, but I'm looking at the numbers. And a couple of very important points in what we've discovered. These were numbers that I was given. I took them to all three front-running camps. None of them said they're not true. 450,000 memberships, Hal? That's 2/3 of the membership in less than 100 ridings. So 2/3 of the membership in less than 1/3 of the ridings. That means that there might be a heavy concentration in certain areas. I'm told that these memberships are concentrated in Western Canada and rural Ontario. There's a lot of places that aren't within that mix, but they count for points as well. Another stat, 20 ridings alone, 20 ridings combined account for more than 100,000 memberships. So is there too heavy a concentration? The Poilievre camp says no. The Charest and Brown camp say yes, and that's our path to victory. We'll find out on September 10th.
Brian, you know, it's interesting. Some of the political pundits say Pierre Poilievre can win the leadership, but he can't defeat Justin Trudeau, whereas Jean Charest can. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that there's some truth to both of those. Jean Charest is a great campaigner. I've told you that before. I watched him when he was opposition leader, when he was premier of Quebec. I remember him back in the 95 referendum. He is a great campaigner, and he hasn't lost that skill. But he is obviously not exciting the base of the Conservative Party membership. Now, will he find enough support to win? Perhaps. But if he does that, he may lose the party. But he could win in a general election. I'm not as down on the idea of Pierre Poilievre automatically losing to Justin Trudeau. That seems to be the thought process of a lot of the people in the commentariat. I think that Pierre Poilievre has a very good shot at winning against Justin Trudeau, just like I think Charest does. I don't know about Brown because I haven't seen him in action in the same way. But it's not a sure thing. It's not a sure thing for any of them. When some of the Poilievre camp got upset at my column on the numbers, I said, well, why aren't you saying it's a sure thing? Their response, Hal, was there's no sure thing in politics. And that goes for the Trudeau campaigns matter. So, we could have a different Liberal leader in the next election. So that changes the equation as well. I think that the people at the front of the leadership race in the Conservative Party have a good shot of beating Justin Trudeau or whoever is Liberal leader. But, there's a lot of ground between now and then for things to change.
Brian, still with politics, documents released in court show that former Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall was offering advice to one of the Freedom Convoy organizers, Chris Barber, early on. What exactly was Wall telling Barber?
Early on, he was giving them warnings similar to things I wrote in my columns as the Freedom Convoy was coming. And that's make sure you practice good political hygiene. Don't be seen standing with racists or other groups with nefarious causes, because that will tar your entire message and organization. That's a big part of what Brad Wall was saying early on. They obviously didn't listen because the same court documents that tell us that Brad Wall was advising or communicating with Chris Barber, who he knows from Swift Current, they also show that Pat Kane was in fact an organizer, especially early on. And Pat Kane, he has been associated with all kinds of groups, easily described as racist. So, and they've tried to distance themselves from him because of that, but early on he was in there. The other part of advice that I thought was really good that Brad Wall gave was about a week and a half, 2 weeks in, he was saying, look, there's some changes being made by provincial governments. Don't you think it's time to declare victory, go home, and donate a lot of this money to veterans groups and the Salvation Army and things like that, and just declare victory? They obviously didn't take that advice. And a little while later, protests were declared illegal. The Emergencies Act came in. I think if they had followed that advice, the Canadian public's view of the convoy would be much more positive than it is now. I know they've got a lot of support, but there's also a lot of Canadians with very negative views on them. I think they should have listened to Wall's advice.
Federal Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos caused a bit of a stir, Brian, when he said that Canadians will never be fully vaccinated and that we'll need to get shots against COVID-19 every 9 months. Now, was he serious about this, or was this maybe taken a little out of context?
He was serious about it, and he wasn't taken out of context, sadly. Look, this is not what I am hearing from medical doctors. This is not what I'm hearing from public health officials or infectious disease specialists. Is there going to be a part of the population that will need booster shots on an ongoing basis, much like we have for the flu shot? Absolutely. And who are they? They tend to be people who are older, who have pre-existing medical conditions, and this will offer them a higher level of protection. Just like these same people get the flu shot, they need to get an annual shot. And that's what I'm hearing when I talk to doctors. Jean-Yves Duclos is not a doctor. He is the health minister, but he's an economist by training. You shouldn't take medical advice from me. You shouldn't take medical advice from Jean-Yves Duclos. He is going to turn off an awful lot of Canadians. Look, I am, by current standards, fully vaccinated. I don't think that I need to be going and getting third, fourth, and fifth shots because of my age, my health profile, my discussions with my own medical professionals. That's what Canadians need to be doing, not listening to a minister who seems to be intent on putting fear into the population that this is never going away. We're always going to have to live with it. Yes, to a degree, we will have to continue living with it. But that doesn't mean like we're back in March 2020. And that's how he makes it sound when he talks, that we're still in panic mode. No, we're not in panic mode. The fall's going to be a little bit bumpier than we would like, but we are not back in March 2020.
Let me ask you something. There's talk that since the Trudeau Liberals only suspended restrictions, that they may actually return in the fall. What are you hearing?
They have talked about them returning in the fall, and they've talked about changing that definition of fully vaccinated, which might mean that in the fall we get the vaccine mandates back for federal workers, or to be able to get on a plane, train, or automobile, or not automobile, but plane, train, or a ship in this country. That's been suspended for now. No other country, by the way, had it when we brought it, or when we finally got rid of it. They're talking about bringing that back in. When I talk to people in the airline industry, and I know we're going to talk about the problems there, they say that this is part of an ongoing concern, that it is sowing confusion, it's sowing doubt that the airline industry is going to be able to operate as usual come the fall, and that this is causing staffing problems and concerns. Look, this government seems to hold on to COVID protocols harder and tighter than anywhere else in the world, even Australia, and they were one of the hardest when it came to restrictions, starting to drop them, but not the Trudeau government, who were able to use this for political gain back in September and narrowly, very narrowly, win the election. Now they don't want to give it up because they know it can be a powerful political tool with the fear that they're able to sow.
Now let's talk a bit about the airline industry, which you mentioned just a moment ago. Earlier this week, Canadian Airlines were among the worst in the world for delays, and several Canadian airports, not just Pearson, were on the list for most delayed airports. Brian, is this just a Canadian problem, or are we seeing this worldwide?
A bit of both. And if you talk to the government, they'll say, well, look, it's not on us. This is happening around the world. Look at Charles de Gaulle. Well, sure, let's look at Charles de Gaulle, the main airport serving Paris, France. They had a strike over the weekend. That's why they finally beat out Pearson as the most delayed airport. But when you look at the top 20 airports for delays for incoming flights, it included 5 Canadian airports: Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Ottawa, and Calgary. 5 out of the top 20. By the way, not a single American airport on the list of most delayed airports. But we've got 5 Canadian ones. That tells us that maybe we've got a bit of a domestic problem here. Now, Transport Minister Omar Al-Gabra, he says, we've done everything we can. I don't believe him. I think that they could do more. And the Public Safety Minister, Marco Mendicino, who's in charge of the border agents, he is saying everything's going just fine. We're moving as fast as we can. We have homegrown problems in this country when it comes to security screening going through and customs agents coming out. We don't have enough customs agents, and the ArriveCan app is causing problems. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. One, it's slowed down the processing times from an average of 30 seconds to 4 minutes. Multiply that by the thousands of passengers coming through an airport like Pearson in a busy day. So multiply that by all the passengers, and then you'll understand why there's backups. Then you've got the ArriveCan app that you have to use to be able to enter the country, even if you're a citizen. Well, I'm able to use the ArriveCan app. I don't find it difficult at all. But a lot of people aren't tech savvy. Or you take someone like, years ago before she passed, we used to bring my grandmother over every summer. She couldn't have used the technology. Now let's add in a language barrier. It's only available in English, French, and Spanish. So you've got an Indian grandmother or a Chinese grandmother or a Filipino grandmother coming over. And visit any international airport in Canada, that's happening. You've got someone in their 80s or 90s with a language barrier trying to fill out their vaccination status in a language they don't understand, maybe with a vaccine we don't use. It's causing delays. The border mayors have said it has to go. The customs agents say this is a main source of the problem, but the minister says no, it's all just fine.
So it's bad at the airports, and Brian, apparently things are also still pretty bad at passport offices. But the minister put out a statement that they're really trying to help open things up by opening up the bathroom facilities. I guess it's bad when.
Yeah, you've got to give people a place to go. I wish this were a joke statement, but this falls under the category of not the Onion. This is not satire. This is reality. Last week, they were boasting about how in Montreal, they went from having people camp out for 2 days, and it was down to camping out for 1 day. I don't think this is what the Trudeau government meant when they said they would help Canadians go camping a couple of elections ago, was camping outside of passport offices. There's 35 dedicated passport offices across the country. The department admits that in 11 of them, there are persistent problems. That includes all the major cities. So I've received information from Calgary, from Vancouver, Victoria, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, and the list goes on. We've now had to have a minister say, well, we're giving people a bit of shelter from the hot sun. We're letting people use the bathroom, and we're handing out water bottles. How about you start processing applications properly? This is something that we've done for more than a century. They're still not back up to the capacity that they were at prior to the pandemic. They haven't lost staff. They haven't laid anybody off. There was no mass exodus of people who weren't vaccinated. So stop claiming it's a staffing issue. Stop blaming other people. Do your job, Minister Gould.
Brian, we only have about 30 seconds left here, but I want to chat with you about some cool news here. Italian sports car maker Ferrari could become part of Canada's auto industry. Will Ferrari actually begin making automobiles here in Canada?
Oh, that would be so cool, wouldn't it? No, but they're not going to make cars. But here's what's happening. They're looking for a supplier for electric vehicle batteries. And, as you've heard, we've already got a couple of plants in the works in Canada, here in Ontario. There's some, parts makers in Quebec helping, and we've got critical minerals in BC and Ontario that are part of this. So Ferrari is looking at Ontario as a place to get and source their batteries for when they start a transition to having about 40% of their cars be electric. So that would be very cool if they were making them here. Still cool that they might be getting serious parts, though, because one of the most iconic brands in the world.
One of our regular contributors and Toronto Sun columnist, Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Residential fires can be so devastating to families. Even if there are no injuries or fatalities, you could lose everything. But too often, they are deadly, and many of those fires are preventable. Joining us now to discuss fire prevention and safety is Troy Hicks. He's the Fire Prevention Officer with the City of Lethbridge Fire Department. Troy, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Now, Troy, there have been a number of fires here in Lethbridge over the past year. What has been the number one cause of these blazes? Is maybe people not properly disposing of their cigarettes?
Yeah, you know what, Hal? Every year, we usually run into the same types of fires. This year, though, 2022, and even last year, 2021, we have definitely seen an increase in improper disposal of smoking materials. I don't know, maybe because of COVID, so many more people were home and different things like this, working from home. But yeah, we have definitely seen an increase in smoking material fires.
So where are people actually disposing of their smokes? They're putting them in plant pots? Like, what are they doing with them?
Absolutely. We have everything from planters, or we've had issues with plastic buckets that the person thought there was water in. We've even had issues with people using a proper ashtray, but it's an ashtray that's meant for indoors, not outdoors, and they'll have it on their back patio. We all know the winds here in southern Alberta, and they go outside, they have their cigarette, they put it out, but it's not really out. And once they go back inside, the wind picks up, blows those embers around, and whether it's a lawn chair or anything like that, it catches it on fire.
Are there still incidents as well of people maybe smoking in bed, falling asleep with a cigarette in their hands?
In my time here, I haven't seen that type of fire in years. It's always been just improperly disposed of when they're putting them out.
Now, Troy, we also often see a lot of grass fires here in southwestern Alberta, especially when it's so dry. Are many of those fires caused by people maybe tossing their cigarette out the window?
Absolutely. We see it every day. I see it when I drive home, up down the coulees and stuff like that. I see it on the highway. I can't 100% say that every fire on the side of the highway is caused by that. We could have anything from sparks from maybe trucks with their brakes are locked on, or train tracks or something as well. But definitely a large percentage of them are from people throwing cigarettes out their window.
So how can you educate people more as to some of the causes of the fires and what we can do to prevent those fires, such as not throwing your cigarette out the window?
Absolutely. No, we will put out media releases. I actually put out a media release here in the city yesterday about planters, and just it's not meant to be. When it comes to highways, we have other provinces here in Canada that there's actually fines. People can contact the police, take the license plate number down, and people are issued very hefty fines for throwing cigarettes and stuff outside their windows. It is something that's been discussed here in Southern Alberta and in Lethbridge in particular. It's not in effect yet. I don't think it's a bad idea. We just need people to realize, unfortunately, we're a society of people that think, oh, it's not going to happen to me. And, I used to be one of those people too, until I started in this profession. And now, it does happen, and it happens a lot, and we can educate as much as we can. But the whole goal is eventually to try to maybe not completely get rid of these types of fires, but at the very least, lower the numbers and just continue to educate more people.
Speaking of education, Troy, how important is it really for parents to speak to young people and their kids about the dangers of using matches and lighters?
Oh, absolutely. We actually have had a couple fires already this year, just caused by curious children that, maybe a lighter was sitting on a table and mom and dad weren't watching, or the babysitter wasn't watching, and they're just like, oh, I seen dad play with this. Yesterday, I had a 12-year-old boy here in my office, and it's not that he's done something wrong. His mom was just concerned about, she didn't feel he respected being around a fire pit enough and the dangers of a fire pit. So I sat here and I talked to him for about a half hour, and he was a great young man. And I educated him. I showed him the fire trucks, and I think he left here maybe realized a bit more like, hey, you know what? This is important. I do need to be respectful for this kind of stuff.
Are there any statistics available as to how many families actually have a fire evacuation plan in place? And what are some of the key steps with an evacuation plan?
As for numbers here in the city, it's been a long time since we've been in the schools because of COVID, but I'm starting to get appointments booked, so we are getting back in to educate. I find that the numbers are quite high when I go to schools, particularly say from kindergarten till about grade 3 or 4. I'm happy with the numbers of people that tell me that, yes, they do have fire safety plans. When we do things like any public education event, like we're at the Home and Garden Expo this year, I did have some parents come up to say how nice it was to see us and actually asked me if I could go over their plan with them. For anybody else that doesn't have one, or maybe someone that wants to do one, there's a few things you really need to hit. Make sure everyone in your house knows what to do when the smoke detector goes off. They have an escape plan. They need to, if their bedrooms are up on the second floor, they can either go down the stairs or whatever they have to do to get out. And they need to have a meeting place. Your meeting place should not be hopefully crossing a road just because of traffic. You want to be careful with that. And if you also have a fenced-in backyard, you don't really want your meeting place to be in the backyard because now you're trapped back there if the fire gets out of control. But there is lots of things. People can contact me at the fire department, and I can definitely give them as much information as they like for their home safety plan.
In the past, when I've spoken to firefighters, they say when you go to bed at night with your bedroom door, always keep it closed. Can you explain why that's so important?
For sure. Even the normal bedroom doors, they're not necessarily what you would call a fire door, which what we see in apartment buildings and hotels and stuff. But even a normal bedroom door, fire needs oxygen in order to burn. In order to keep a fire burning, there has to be enough oxygen. Oxygen is even more important than the fuel. So by closing that door, you are mitigating the amount of oxygen that fire could have. So whether the fire starts in the room, it'll keep it in that room. But if you're in your room sleeping and the fire's out in the hallway or out in something like that, by you having that door closed, you're going to keep all flame, heat, and smoke from getting into your room for a significant amount of time. Therefore, if you can't make it outside, maybe the fire is directly outside your door. Well, you have time to stay in your room. Hopefully, if you have a phone, you can call 911 and let us know what room you're in. Or if you don't, you open up your window and you make sure your neighbors know where you are. And when we arrive to put that fire out, we are coming straight to your window to get you out of there.
And if you have an ensuite bath, I guess you can roll up a towel, a wet towel, throw it under the door to prevent a lot of the smoke from coming in, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every little bit helps because, as we always say, every second matters, right? So,
now, Troy, when there's a fire and you have kids and your pets and you're ready to evacuate, what else should you really grab in a fire? Maybe some photo albums, special memories, or how about hockey card collections?
You know what, Hal? I was looking at your questions this morning, and I could definitely see where you're coming from. Rule of thumb, especially as far as the fire department's concerned, you get your family, you get out. We even educate people that one thing I will say, when a smoke detector goes off, as much as we don't like that sound, pets hate it even more. And chances are your pets are going to hide. If they're not right beside you to take them out as you're leaving, you need to leave. We don't recommend you go back in and get your pets. If you have a fire in your home and the fire department shows up and you and all your family members are outside, not calling the pets not being a family member, but you and your kids are outside, if you let us know that there's a pet inside, we're going inside that building just the same way we would if it was you or your child or anyone in the house, and we're going to try to save that pet.
Are there stickers that we can put on our windows saying, hey, there are pets inside of our home?
I have seen them around. There's a kennel here in Lethbridge that I take my dog on the south side. they have magnets and stickers around. I believe I've seen them at some of the other department stores and home hardware stores, things like that here in the city as well. So,
Troy, how common are kitchen fires? And are they fires tied in with a faulty appliance such as a stove or microwave, or maybe simply cooking that's gotten out of control, like when I usually cook?
yeah, me as well. I keep telling myself that the smoke detector is not my timer. But, you know, when I first started here, Hal, 10 plus years ago, kitchen fires were our number one type. They were the number one type here in the city. Over the last few years, that has changed. We are a lot more into smoking fires, electrical fires, things like that. But the number one types of kitchen fires we receive is, say, people not paying attention when they're cooking, unattended, people leaving their kitchen, leaving their stove. I know we're a busy society. You know, we're a technological society. We're always on our phones or computers or on TV or video games. We just need to remind people that when you're cooking, you need to remember you're cooking. And that's even in the kitchen and or outside of your barbecue. It needs to be attended. You need to be paying attention. We do sometimes have fires caused by old faulty appliances. 90% of the time with those, though, it turns into be an electrical fire, because lots of times what it is it's the electrical cord or something like that that's just it's not covered, it's not doing well, it overheats, and that's what catches fire. And then the stove is actually a victim of the fire and not the cause.
How about some of the older, smaller appliances that we leave plugged in? Let's say maybe a toaster or even a hairdryer when we take off, go to work, and maybe go on holidays. Could they also maybe potentially cause a fire?
The risk is always there. I experienced a fire many, many years ago with a coffee pot. Just the power surged. It was a very older home. The power surged and the coffee pot actually caught on fire. Wasn't a lot of damage. Everyone was fine, but it did. Ever since then, the only thing that stays plugged in when I leave my home, other than just for work, but when I leave for any amount of time, the only thing that stays plugged in is my fridge or freezer. Unplug everything else. And that's not to make people nervous. We need to remind people, if your house is wired properly, we also remind people, you know what, use a proper CSA approved power bar that has surge protection. That will help you with that. But you know what? Why have stuff plugged in if you're not using it? So things like a coffee pot, toaster, I can tell you right now, mine at home are not plugged in. We have not had a lot of issues here in the city of Lethbridge, but even when it comes to phone chargers, if you're not charging your phone, unplug it. Don't leave it in. Anything that's plugged in, electricity produces heat, and it leaves that slight opportunity that something could happen. I mean, most electrical outlets don't just burst into flames, but it could come down to anything. There could be dust on it. There could be, maybe it's very close to curtains that may be like very thin curtains or shears that could be close to it, that radiant heat from the plug could catch them on fire. So I've always lived in the habit, and I have a 21-year-old son that I've taught him since he was very young as well. As far as I know, he still leaves everything unplugged as well.
So Troy, how much time do we typically have to evacuate a home before maybe flames or smoke overtake us?
You know what, that is a great question. When I was looking at your list, I thought that was fantastic. With the amount of materials and stuff used now to make new furniture, it's not exaggerating when we say every second counts. Years ago, even if we say as much as 10 to 15 years ago, by the time something ignited in your home, it took a few minutes before the smoke to get thick enough to set off the detector. And once that went off, you still had 5-6 minutes to get out. Nowadays, with new furniture and the amount of products and petroleum products that are in furniture, the smoke is so toxic, you need to get out as fast as you can. To put a number on it, I would say when your smoke detector goes off, you need to be out of that house within 2 minutes. And that's just really trying to train people and remind people that, you know what, treat it as real. That smoke detector goes off, you get out and you make your way out the door. So, you know, it's a good idea. Just make sure your exit doors are always clear. Don't have 50 pairs of shoes in front of your doors that's going to stop something. Don't try to search for different things like we spoke of earlier, photo albums and stuff like that. If you get out of that place properly and you close the door, you have your doors closed, there's a good chance that fire is not going to spread and not going to damage too much of your home. And I know it's hard. Listen, I've spoken to so many families that have had fires, and obviously they're in a horrible point of their day in their lives. And I just try to reiterate to them, say, you know what though, you're still here hugging your child, you're still alive. It's just stuff. It can be redone. And there's quite a few times actually that even after a structure fire, we can send some of our firefighters in. The homeowners have asked us to go in to look for passports or maybe an urn and some of that. And 9 times out of 10, we do find it. We bring it out and give it to them. So the biggest thing that we just want people to realize is you need to get out. As soon as you hear that smoke detector, teach your kids, teach everybody in the home that it's real. You need to get out, and the importance of making sure they work. Smoke detectors have expiry dates. They're only good for 10 years.
It seems like a lot of home builders these days are building more 2.5 story, even 3-story homes. Do you think we should maybe have a rope ladder available in some of those higher homes?
You know, I actually had a lady call me the other day and ask me that same question. And rope ladders are good. They are very good. And if you, the family member that you're going to put that rope ladder in, if you feel safe and trusting that they can use that ladder, then fantastic. I agree with that. That's okay. The biggest thing to remember about those rope ladders, though, is they are rated for a certain weight, and they're actually used once and they're no good anymore. So if you have one of those in, you can't train with it, you can't practice with it. It's just you have to be able to use it. So lots of times what I tell people is we don't want people breaking windows, jumping out of windows, things like that. If you're on your second floor or even your third floor and you hear your smoke detector go off, it's just like we were all told when we were kids, and I teach the young kids at school now, you know, you touch the door with the back of your hand because hopefully you're sleeping with your door closed. If it's not too hot, you open it. If you open it and there's just smoke in front of you, take a t-shirt, something, cover your mouth, get down nice and low, crawl down the stairs, go down on your belly, on your butt, whatever you have to do, and you need to be able to get out. If you open that door and there's flames in front of you, like I said earlier, that's when you just close the door. If you have a towel or a sweater or something you can jam on the bottom, do that. Either call 911 or open your window and start yelling so people know where you are, and that's the first place we're going.
Now, every spring and fall, when we have a time change, we're always reminded to check the batteries and our smoke detectors here. What about carbon monoxide detectors? Should we have one on every level of our home, Troy?
You know what? It's definitely not. It's such case dependent on that. Like I have a carbon monoxide detector in my home, and I have it in my basement. I have it outside my furnace room, my laundry room, things like that. I always tell people that if they have something, like, you need to think of the different areas in your home where you could possibly get carbon monoxide. So, you know, like if you're where you have your furnace room, where you have things like that, you can have it down there. If you have a natural gas fireplace or anything like that in your home, or even a wood burning fireplace, definitely a good idea to have one on that level. I also tell people that have an attached garage, it's a good idea to have a carbon monoxide detector just outside the door that goes into their attached garage. We all, like I said, we're all so busy. Sometimes we forget. We've had issues with people warming up their vehicles in their attached garage with the door closed. We've had people coming home from work 3 o'clock in the morning. They go into the garage, they shut the garage door, they go in and they forget to shut their car off. So it's so important to have those carbon monoxide detectors, absolutely. And it's the same thing with those. Batteries you need to change every year as well.
Now, before we let you go here, let's talk a bit about fire extinguishers for a home. There are different types for, grease fires, for electrical fires. What's the best type of fire extinguisher that people can have in their house?
People need to have an ABC extinguisher. Now, a Class A fire is just your ordinary combustibles, wood, paper, anything like that. A Class B is a fuel or flammable liquid fire, and a Class C is an electrical fire. There is a Class K extinguisher out there that is used for kitchen grease fires, but it's not a grease fire at home. It's a grease fire in a restaurant that works in conjunction with the suppression system that's already in the restaurant over the deep fryers. Even if you deep fry every day at home, you don't need it. What people need to remember is an ABC extinguisher will put out all those types of fires. What's in an ABC extinguisher is baking soda. So if someone doesn't have one, or even if they do, maybe have a couple boxes of baking soda around as well. And when you're cooking, have a lid beside you. It's not attended. If all of a sudden something catches on fire, you can either grab the extinguisher or just cover it with the lid, shut the burner off and move it off the burner. But so important. And one last thing I'd like you to say about cooking, where a lot of times we have, if you ever do have a fire inside your oven or inside your microwave, don't panic. Just hit the power button. Don't open the door. If you open the door, that rush of oxygen is going to make that fire get even bigger. If you leave the door closed and just hit the power button, there's not enough oxygen there to support the combustion, and that fire will go out in seconds. You're going to have to give your oven or your microwave a good clean, but at least your house is still standing and nothing is spread.
Troy Hicks, Fire Prevention Officer with the City of Lethbridge Fire Department. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks again for having me, Hal. I really appreciate it.
You bet. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.